How's it going, Exiles? This is my final version of the Spark Bloodmage, but now let's enjoy the showcase and I will be back with you in 30 seconds. Alright, thanks for watching the showcase and here we are back with the video. So before you think, what the hell, this is like a 1 hour 20 minutes video, so this is actually a different guide than I do it normally. So it's basically an all-in-one build guide which can get you from early endgame to a totally overpowered build in the very late game which crushes everything no problem. So I highly recommend you check the description of this video. We have all the trade links for all 3 variants, we have a detailed written guide and planner. We have the POBs, we have the loot filter, and of course there's jump links to the sections of this guide for all 3 versions, the full live endgame version, the mid-endgame live hybrid version, and the early game Widowhail frozen Spark build. And of course we also have the showcases for the lower tier builds so you can see how I crush endgame maps with very little investment. So before we go into the guide, just one little note. I put a lot of effort into this video, so I would highly appreciate if you like, comment and subscribe. Let me know if you like the guide, let me know if you have questions, and also make sure to show up to the stream so I can answer your questions live. It really helps me and I would really appreciate it. So now, enough said about the build, let's start with the actual build guide. And we're gonna start with the full life scaling Uber versions and the skill gems. Alright, let's look at the skill gems. So first of all, we have our life remnants, which is always active. So we have it with harmonic remnants 2 and remnant potency 3 to just, give it a little bit more life regen. And then we have our wand here, which is galvanic field. We just use a couple of skills to just put random support gems in. We don't even need this, right? But I'm just talking about this for the very beginning, so it's like easy to understand. So we have this one here with random support gems, and then I just have like random skills here. I'm not even using them. I'm just using them to socket support gems, because we need to socket 10 green and 10 red support gems for our gem enthusiast. So we get 5% extra maximum life and 5% movement speed. So that's pretty much the only reason why we even have these skills on the bar. We are not casting them actively at all. It's just for, the support gems here. So let's talk about the real skills. So we have Sigil of Power in our weapon swap. I still think this is just extremely strong for stationary encounters and bosses. We have it with Magnified Area. We have it with Prolonged Duration. We have it with Life Tap here, which actually doesn't matter, but I'm just using it like for another red gem. And we have it with cooldown recovery too. Then we have Spark, which is our main skill. So you have a couple of options here. Actually, I only play it like in 2 different ways. So this is my base Spark. As you can see, it's like 910k DPS on the tooltip. And I play it with Unleash, Considered Casting, Projectile Acceleration 3, and Heft, and Atulis Bloodletting. So Atulis Bloodletting is what's making this build work. It's basically giving you 2% extra damage as physical damage for every 10 life cost. So if you look at our pool, we have 8.2k life, right? And our Spark right now costs 5,000 life. So this gives us 2% damage per 10 life score cost, so this is a 1000% extra physical, basically. So if you look at the tooltip of this spell, it basically does only deal physical, right? So this is, physical hit damage up to like 132k, and here's lightning, like 10k, it's like 1/10, and just a little bit of fire from the gain here. So these are completely irrelevant. So we really just do physical damage, and we only have the lightning pretty much to do the shock. So but it doesn't really matter. And then looking at the support gems, we have Heft, just gives us more physical damage. The Unleash, it's not really so much about the double cast, it's about the 150% cost multiplier. Because, well, you can see right now it costs 5,000 life. If I remove this, it costs 3,000 life. So you can see the DPS significantly decreases, and that's just because of the life cost here. And same goes for the other ones. So Projectile Acceleration 3, I think it's nice to have like some projectile speed, and it also has like a cost multiplier. So all gems with cost multipliers usually work just fine. However, if I'm in a mapping scenario and I don't need this, so I kind of decide, do I run speed maps? Then I use mobility and ricochet 3. And if I'm not running speed maps, I'm just using ricochet 3 and unleash. So this is my for hard maps, like for abyss maps, for juice maps. This would be my setup. And if the maps are just a little bit less juiced and a little bit less important, I would just switch this one for mobility even. So I'm just faster. So these two gems are really just for boss DPS, high DPS scenario setups. Usually, you can remove this. This is usually my 500k DPS when I'm just speedrunning maps. I add mobility so I can run faster. Then you have one curse. You can kind of, decide if you want temporal chains or, I should actually qualities, by the way. You can use temporal chains or enfeeble. Enfeeble lets mobs do less damage. Temporal chains makes them slower. I guess it's kind of personal preference. We use it with hate and curse, curse ground, prolonged duration 2, magnified area 2, and focus curse. And then last but not least, I have Flame Wall here. I basically never use it, but you can use this to juice up your boss damage, right? So Flame Wall is basically free extra projectile damage. So if you want to use this, you can absolutely do this. I kind of, don't do it, but maybe I should do it more on bosses. But, I'm fast enough with bosses anyway. But anyway, if you want to use it, you can use it with Fortress. Fortress Run, actually, prolonged duration 2. Life Tap, again, is just a random gem here I use for, having my red gem limit, and rapid casting 2. So let's look at the items for the full life scaling version. So we start with the most important stuff, which is the unique items. So most important for this build is Raspit. If you don't have this, you cannot play this build. So a little of stuff to remark on this item. So there's a couple of different roles because you will have it corrupted and you can have this to have a 6% increased critical hit chance, you can have 12% spell damage, and you can have 7% max life. So ideally, if you have an unlimited budget, you want to have 7% max life, 12% damage, and 6% crit. 7% max life is better than 12% increased damage, but not much better. But the more cost basically you add to your spell, the more damage you do. So in an order of importance, I would say 7% of max life. After that, you would have 12% damage, and after that, you would have 6% crit. But you know what? You can also just get a regular one like this with 3 sockets, because you're going to put a little bit extra life in it, and you're going to save a lot of money. Then next, let's look at the armor. So as soon as you receive like 4,000 to 4,500 life, you want to switch from the AIS hybrid to Kaom's Heart. So you can get this corrupted with 1650 life, but it's extremely expensive. So I would recommend to just get a 3-socket one. And I also would recommend in the trade to watch out for items which already have the 9% increased maximum life socketed in, because these runes are like 1 divine or more than 1 divine each. So you might find a good deal if you just search for it, which has this already socketed in. For example, I got this for, I think, 8 to 9 divines. And if I would buy it with 3 empty sockets and the runes, I would have paid like 11 to 12 divines. Then next on, we have the Veil of the Night. So this is also, you only want to use this if you have enough life. If you only have like 5k life, you don't want to use this. So what does this do? Basically, it just gives us 50% increased max life, and it removes our elemental resistances. So since we solely scale about max life and life regeneration, we can actually get away with having no elemental resistances. And it also opens up a lot of useful mods on our rings, gloves, boots, and belt. For this one, you can also get this corrupted with more than 50% increased life. Again, it's going to be very expensive, and I think it's not going to be that good. I happen to get this 3-socket for relatively cheap, but you can also just get this for 2-socket, then it basically doesn't cost anything at all. So let's look at the amulet. So ideally, you want to have a tier 1 maximum life and then a percent increased maximum life on this. You want to have all spell skills, you want to have crit damage bonus, and cast speed. The prefix slot, you will pretty much always have this increased spell damage, unless, again, you're filthy rich and you can afford this with item rarity. But most of the time, this will have spell damage. This has something to do with the craft, because it needs to have spell damage so you can craft the all spell skills. And, but yeah, look for gold amulet if you don't mind, because item rarity always helps. And again, I'm anointing cooked here, It gives us 60% critical damage bonus and 25% reduced global defenses. Since we don't have any armor, energy shield, or evasion, our global defenses are pretty much 0 anyway, so we really don't care about these 25% reduced global defenses. Now looking at the wand, I actually run this because I got this for cheap. I bought this for, I think, 25 divines, and it already had the +2 spell skills socketed in, and these runes are crazy expensive. But from the base type, this wand is not the best. So ideally, you don't want to have lightning damage in the prefix, you want to have spell damage in the prefix, because we are pretty much only dealing physical damage, so the increased lightning damage basically does nothing for us. So highly recommend get one with spell damage. Then for the corrupted, increased spell damage for spells which cost life. This is like the best mod you can get for this build, because, you know, your spells cost life, so this is another flat spell damage. Then, you know, you can have another gained as, you know, fire, lightning, cold. I would probably recommend cold because you can get freeze. With fire, you just get ignite, which basically does nothing. So gained as cold is probably the best for this build. And then in the suffix slot, you want to have +5 or +4 lightning skills, depending on your budget. You want to have critical hit chance, and ideally you want to have critical hit damage bonus. I have reduced attribute requirements. Again, I have a dead mod, so I didn't pay a whole lot comparatively for this wand. But if you want to have the perfect wand, really, increase spell damage, gain damage as cold, increase spell damage for spells that cost life, +5 lightning skills, critical hit chance, and critical hit damage bonus. So looking further at our rings, so since we use the Veil of the Night here, we don't need resistances our rings, which opens up our rings to basically get the stats we want. So what stats do we want on a ring? My rings are not very good yet, so I'm still working on the rings, but ideally you want to have 40 to 50% rarity on your rings, because since you're using the helm slot where you can usually get like 45% increased item rarity, you kind of have to transfer it to your rings. So I would try to get like 40% item rarity. I wouldn't even sweat the other stats so much. I'm still working on upgrading my rings, but ideally you would want to have item rarity, like you want to have a gold ring or like a cast speed ring, like what is it, like a pearl ring. So either gold ring or pearl ring, you want to have 20 to 40% item rarity. You want to have tier 1 life roll, so 100 plus life. You want to have cast speed, and you want to have one attribute. It doesn't really matter what attribute. You can have strength, dex, int. It's going to balance out in the end, because we need 60 int and strength, 60 strengths and 60 int anyway, or like 158 int. So it's kind of going to balance out in the end anyway. For the second ring, it's pretty much exactly the same. Still, I'm using still an old one here with resistances. So ideally, switch this resistance on this ring for a magic find, and you have a great ring here. For the gloves, we want to have gloves with effect of socketed items. So I would not recommend crafting these yourself if you want to have item rarity, because there's no deterministic craft to get these with item rarity. It's always going to be RNG, and if you buy a base with item rarity, it's going to be incredibly expensive. And since we don't care about resistances, we actually don't have to overpay for these. So ideally, energy shield, it completely doesn't matter what base. You can get armor, energy shield, evasion. It completely doesn't matter, since we don't play any defenses other than life pool, right? So it literally doesn't matter. You can buy any gloves. You want to have 2 sockets in it, or you want to have the 100% increased effect of socketed items. You want to have rarity, and you want to have life. Right? So that is really what you want. The other prefixes don't matter at all for this build. And then we can socket in our 80% increased effect of Arcane Search, which is going to be the Kurgal's Gaze rune. And you could socket cast speed or life. It's probably better to socket cast speed. I'm probably going to switch this, but you can also socket life, so both are pretty good. But cast speed is probably a little bit better here. For the boots, I'm trying to get movement speed boots. This is obviously optional. You can also run any other boots with like stats and max life on it to get like a little bit more damage. But I prefer to have high movement speed boots. I also got like a great deal on this. I bought these with just 1 socket for like, I think 6 divines, and I slammed the second socket in, so I was like super crazy happy. But yeah, for the boots, you're basically just looking, again, any base, doesn't matter, energy shield, evasion, armor, it's completely irrelevant for this build. You're looking at 30-35% movement speed if you can get it. You're looking at the increased effect of socketed items if you can get it. You're looking at item rarity and intelligence for like the attribute. Ideally, you want to have maximum life in the prefix, but I'm probably not going to upgrade these boots. But if you can, and if you, for example, don't want to have the expensive movement speed boots, go for a maximum life in the prefix. It's going to be the best for this build. Resistances and stuff like this do not matter. So get increased item rarity, maximum life, get an attribute, get 100% increased effect of socketed items if you want to have the speedy boots. If not, just get as much attributes, life, and item rarity as possible. So for the belt, this is pretty much just an item to pick up maximum life and strength and chaos resistance. So all the other stats on this belt really doesn't matter. I have the 21% increased life regeneration rate during flask effect on here, but I'm not using it. I was using this with Blood of the Warrior before to get some extra life regeneration, but I spec'd out of it. So really the only stats which matter on your belt are maximum life and strength and chaos resistance. So if you have money, a Headhunter would be a nice belt. Probably an Ingenuity would also be better than the stat stick. You would lose a little bit of life, but you would get the item rarity. So once I have better rings, I would probably upgrade this to an Ingenuity. But, the belt slot for this build is like rather irrelevant. So if you don't have too much currency, I would recommend just get one with maximum life strength and chaos resistance and just ignore all the other stats on the belt here. So for this build, we're actually using a life flask. We are not using it for the flask itself. We're just using it for our passive tree. And you want to have one with as much increased charges as possible. The maximum is 127 charges. 125 is fine. 127 is expensive. This 125 is like 10 exalts or something like that. It's cheap. But you want to have one. The increased amount recovered, you can get it. It helps a little bit if you're ramping up. If you don't have the increased amount recovered, don't sweat it. But in this build, you have to ramp up. So if we are ramping up right now, you can see it's fairly slow. So you can spam your flask, and that's just going to speed up the ramping up progress. Right now, we're ramped up and good to go. And you can use your flask to ramp up. It helps a little bit. Also, it helps with this mod we talked about on the belt, the increased life regeneration rate during effect of any life flask. But this would really be only during like ramp up phase to get your damage going. So it's really not so important. So why do we need this flask though? If you look in our skill tree, we have this Sanguine Tides here, which basically says, you have less life recovery from flask, which doesn't really matter. Gain 1 life flask charge per life spent. So this is basically the flask is always going to be full. And then when you hit an enemy with a life flask at full charges, it consumes 40% of the charges and you gain 1% damage as physical per charge. So at 125 charges, this actually gives you a 50% more physical damage. And if you're running a map, you will see this flask is just literally always full because it gains a charge for like every 4% life spent. As you can see, if I press Spark like once, I'm already spending like 50% of my life. So this is, and the buff lasts 3 seconds, so this is always going to be active. So highly recommend getting a flask with a lot of charges here. The mana flask, completely irrelevant for this build. We're not using it. And for the charms, I'm usually using a gold charm. I'm using this sawing charm here, which is cheap, and I'm using a random stun charm. Alright, taking a look at the passive tree for the full life variant. So let's start with the Ascendancy. So one thing to note, I'm running without Life Leech. So I see a lot of other creators running the Life Leech, and I tested this now for around 10 hours of gameplay. I didn't die at all. I didn't feel like any problems whatsoever. So if you have problems staying alive, you can absolutely get the Life Leech in. You can, for example, sacrifice the Sanguine Tides, or you can sacrifice the Gore Spike. They probably should do relatively the same amount of damage. But if you feel like you're not staying alive, if your ramp up takes too long or whatever, you can definitely play Life Leech, but ultimately you will not need the Life Leech and you can invest everything into pure DPS. So we get like these 25% life loss prevented. This is just like a nice defensive layer here. Then obviously we have the base crit here for spells, which is 15%. Then we had the Gore Spike. Gore Spike doesn't show up in the tooltip, but I read on Reddit that multiple people tested and said that it works. So this is not going to show up in your tooltip. But if you have 8.2k maximum life, this is what, like, I'm terrible at math, but this is like 200%, I guess. Critical damage bonus. Please let me know in the comments down below if this math was incorrect here, but and yeah, then we have the Sanguine Tide. So this basically gives you 50% more damage. If we have this flask here, right, which is 125 charges, it takes 40% of those charges, which is going to be 50% more physical damage here. And it lasts for 3 seconds. And since you regenerate 1 life flask per 4% life spent, this is always going to be active as long as you're like fighting. You will always have this 50% buff. So this is extremely strong. And the only thing you need for this is really a flask with, as many increased charges as possible. Then, let's go over the tree. So the tree is really much as just passing as it gets. We really don't get anything on the tree. We pretty much just pass to like important nodes we want. So we pick up obviously in our weapon set some spell damage here, some crit damage bonus. We're not gonna pick up crit chance from the tree. You can still do it if your life is lower. You can still pick up some crit chance, but I'm only picking up spell damage bonus from the tree. Then we go up here, and here we socket our Undying Hate. This is like mandatory for this build. If you have one with plus attributes, it's nice, but it's definitely not mandatory. Yeah, this one gives me 21 extra intelligence for the 3 nodes, but you really don't need this. You just basically need any with like Tech Rod, so you don't have to pay the extra premium. The small passive skills doesn't do anything at all, so the only thing which would do something is the Conquered Attribute passive skills anyway. So if you can get that for cheap, you can pick it up, but it's absolutely not a requirement. So then we just pass over here, and here we pick up mandatory nodes. So mandatory is our Arcane Surge is going to work with life instead of mana. Arcane Surge is our primary attack speed and regeneration booster here, right? So we pick this up, and then we pick up the chance to gain Arcane Surge when you deal a crit. Since this is a 100% crit build, we pretty much always have Arcane Surge when we're fighting, and this just gives you like 40% increased effect of it. Then these nodes here is basically for the life regeneration rate. So we want to pick up as much life regeneration as possible. So we take these, and this is just a nice, 40% increased spell, but more importantly, that has 15% increased life cost of skills. And the life cost of skills scales with our bloodletting, so we basically want to have as much life cost as possible, so that's why this node is pretty much mandatory here. And then we're just passing over, just getting the crit bonus. We just pass through the jewel slots, passing. We get the blood magic here. So this is optional. You don't have to get this. You can also just use your mana and use like the Zenith 2 support gem for a good damage boost. But I feel like I don't want to lose Sigil of Power. Because if you don't have blood magic, you will not have Sigil of Power because you're not spending mana. If you have blood magic, Sigil of Power basically works with the spells which spend life. So that's why I prefer to have blood magic. So I can use Sigil of Power in stationary encounters like Simulacrum or the, a little bit harder boss fights. Then we pick up these life regeneration small nodes here. Again, we want to get as much life regen as possible. I pick up this entire crit cluster here because it's just way too good to pass. Then we have our From Nothing for Resolute Technique. This is like cheap. It just costs like 5 exalts. So we pick it up here so we can get this 3% increased maximum life, this 3% increased maximum life. We can get this skill effect duration, which is nice for Spark. And this is like a pure value node, reduce of slowing potency debuffs, so it really helps against, temporal chains, chilled, and whatever. If you have extra points, you can pick up these strengths nodes. If you're not like having, level 96 or whatever yet, you can just skip these. And then it's just passing. We pick up this entire life regeneration cluster here. Note that life recovery rate is multiplicative with life regeneration. So these life recovery rates are actually insane. Jewel slot, passing. This is like all the value movement speed nodes here. And don't skip on this one, because your armor, even if you have an energy shield armor, this like gives a lot. But if you play Kaum's Heart, you absolutely have to give this gives you like 15% movement speed or something. I don't know the exact numbers. Then we just have passing. Again, movement speed nodes. And then we pass down here to the Gem Enthusiast. This basically just gives us 5% increased maximum life and 5% increased movement speed. So that's a very good value node. And yeah, that's my current tree right now. I don't really know what to optimize. You could save like a couple of points. Like for example, if I get the 3 Grand Spectrums and I can get like 9.5k life, I could remove these last crit chance nodes here. Then we could probably get rid of these nodes to save another 5. Then maybe we could get another jewel slot. But I think this is pretty much final for me. So the skill tree works just perfectly for my playstyle. And yeah, and let's just quickly talk about the weapon set. So weapon set 1 is pretty much irrelevant, but I'm only getting it for basically the crit nodes. So these are crit nodes, weapon set 1. These are crit nodes, weapon set 1. Then I have like these movement speed nodes, weapon set 1. Basically, I just don't want to have like the, regeneration nodes in weapon set 1. We barely use weapon set 2 at all, but still like for reasons of completion. I just basically have like these crit things and the Arcane Surge and the damage nodes here. This is what I have in weapon set 1. Now weapon set 2, really, I just have Curse and skill effect duration here. Unfortunately, we lose a lot of value nodes here, which would give Curse magnitudes, but I don't just have don't have a better spot for this jewel. But we still get like the curse magnitudes here. And then we have like the increased curse magnitudes here. You could, probably get like these two. It's probably better to get these two than, maybe waste like these curse magnitudes. I don't know. I'm not using the curses so a lot. Like, it's kind of personal preference. You could also remove skill effect duration and get like the decreased effect of curses, which is nice if you like hit by a temporal chains in a map. But that's pretty much all debatable. But yeah, that's the passive tree. And after that, we're just gonna quickly talk about the jewels here. Alright, let's take a look at the jewels. So first of all, we have our Undying Hate. This is the heart of this build. This enables our crazy life regeneration and defensive layer. Without this jewel, you cannot play this build. And you want to have this jewel in tribute to Techrot. All other jewels do not work. It has to be Techrot. The number there where it says 19,572 souls is irrelevant. You just want to have Techrot. Additionally, you can have attribute passive skills grant, intelligence, strength, dexterity, whatever. It helps. It makes it a little bit more expensive though, but you can use it. In my placement, for example, it basically gives me 21 free intelligence. So, but you have to judge for yourself if you want that. It's definitely not mandatory. On the end, the 21 intelligence will be like 80 life or something like that. So it scales like just a tiny bit. So you don't have to get it, but you can get it. And the reason to choose this jewel is it's going to transform a keystone into Sacrifice of Blood. And Sacrifice of Blood gives us 1 life per second per 8 life spent in the past 8 seconds. So it's basically going to give us our entire life spent back over 8 seconds. But this scales with life regeneration. So we have a lot of life regeneration nodes on the passive tree. So we basically get more life back than we spent. And that's how we get this crazy regeneration, which practically makes us almost immortal. Also, the cherry on top is this gives 50% more life cost of skills. This is supposed to be a downside, but with the bloodletting, it's actually an upside, because remember, we want to have our spark cost as high as possible, and having 50% more life cost definitely helps. For the other jewels, I recommend just getting jewels with critical damage bonus, skill effect duration, magnitude of shock, or spell damage, or cast speed, or something. Critical damage bonus and skill effect duration, I would say, is mandatory, and the third stat, spell damage or magnitude of shock or magnitude of ailments, is usually, these are pretty cheap. You can get these for way less than a divine, and as you can see, I have like these jewels like all over the place. This is like spell damage, critical damage bonus, skill effect duration. This one has crit damage bonus, skill effect duration, magnitude. So trying to get these 3 stats. Now, if you have a lot of money, you can get 3 grand spectrums with life. So, as you can see, my current life is 8.2k. So, by slotting these in, you're not going to increase your damage significantly. So, as you can see, my spark right now, with my movement setup, is at 610k DPS. So, let's now slot in 3 of these grand spectrums. So, 1, 2, and 3. So as you can see, my life now goes up to 9k. So we got like a good chunk of more effective hit pool. But my DPS in this case even got a little lower. Depends on the jewels you have in there, right? Because I pulled the ones with the highest critical damage bonus. So I lost a little bit of DPS. But so again, this is very high, and you're gonna spend like 100 divines for these 3 jewels. So I absolutely do not recommend doing this. If there's anything else you can work on. But this gives you more defenses. And it will later allow you, as soon as you reach like 9.4, 9.5k-ish life, will allow you to redistribute these 3 crit chance nodes here into crit damage bonus. And then you could, for example, get rid of these 2 value nodes and, pick another jewel slot. And then you would actually, benefit from it. So, yes, it is strong. It gives you more survivability. It enables just having much more life. If you have like the corresponding gear, but it's very, very expensive, and the effect is absolute min-maxing. So if you want to go for this for the very last. First get like very good gear, except for these grand spectrums, and at the very end you can get these. I do not recommend getting these any further earlier. And one we didn't talk about for the technically for the jewels, we have the From Nothing here with what is it? Resolute Technique. This basically costs nothing. And it just allows us to get like these 2-3% increased life nodes. And again, I'm getting these 2 value nodes right now. Skill effect duration is nice, and reduced slowing potency is nice if you like chilled or temporary chained. But you know, these will probably ultimately go once I can get these free these nodes up. But just getting these two 6% life nodes without the traveling definitely makes sense. Highly recommend getting this from nothing here for Resolute Technique. And last thing, let's talk about the Anoint. So for this build, I'm pretty much only using one Anoint, which is, you know, just cooked. This is just 60% crit bonus. I think this is the strongest Anoint you can get for this build. Certainly, there's other ones. You can, for example, save all these passing nodes, which is probably better to just save these nodes and, you know, get the Gem Enthusiast on an Anoint. But, you know, I assume I'm going to be passing to this jewel slot a little bit later, but probably this is also another option if you, for example, don't have so many points, right? So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points. Keep in mind these are giving good life, but it's 7 points. So if you want to save these 7 points, you can actually it's actually yeah, it's 7 points. You can actually do that and, you know, anoint the Gem Enthusiast. It's a little bit more expensive to anoint though, but you can definitely do that. But if you know, I would still recommend to get like cooked as an anoint because 60% crit bonus is just pretty much the strongest thing I feel like you can pick up here. Alright, here we have a nice 60% quantity map. We have a map here with, you know, 95 rare monsters and, you know, Delirious. Bunch of negatives, more monster lives, done more damage, less damage, ignited ground, whatever. And we have 15 additional pits and areas overrun by the Abyssal. So let's see what it goes. So one weakness of this build is maps with less recovery. It's not so much of an issue if the maps are not highly juiced, but if you have like 3 or 4 towers influencing the maps and you have your, like 5 to 6 affixes, it gets a little bit rough. So I would recommend to do a slight change to the build when you really want to run this map. I don't recommend running this map, but you can do it. I will show you now, but I would recommend to do like a slight change, and we basically get this fast metabolism here, and we're gonna change our ascendancy to remove the Sanguine Tides and get the Life Leech. And I just removed these 2 random movement speed after killing nodes here, just for showing that I would recommend to get the Life Leech if you want to run these maps. So you can absolutely do this, and I'm going to show you now. Let's just, take this map, for example, which has like a 35 quant, so there's like 3 towers influencing it, and we have the 36 less recovery map, so let's see how this goes. Alright, let's talk about the skills for the hybrid version. So Sigil of Power is still in our weapon swap for the stationary encounters, pretty much standard stuff with magnified area, prolonged duration, and cooldown recovery. Then Spark is our main damage skill. However, now we run the Atuli's Bloodletting here. So what this gem does, it adds 2% of damage as extra physical per 10 life cost. As you can see, currently the life cost for our Spark is 2k. So this basically is gonna add 400% extra damage as physical to the gem. And if you look at the damage numbers here, you see lightning damage is 4k max, physical damage is 16k max, so that's pretty much 4 times as much. So this gem is extremely powerful, and you have a couple of options now with Spark. If you are mapping, I would run this with Ricochet 3, so your projectiles always pierce, and if you run like bosses, I would swap this for Considered Casting. So now we run Considered Casting, we still run the Projectile Acceleration 3, we run Unleash here. Not really so much for the double cast, we just do it because Unleash has a 150% cost multiplier, and remember the cost directly scales with our Atuli's Bloodletting. And then last but not least we have Heft, which just boosts the physical damage of the Atuli's Bloodletting here. So then we have Frostbomb pretty much just for exposure and, you know, also a little bit for the infusions, but we don't really need the infusions anymore in this build since we mainly do our damage through Spark anyway, but you know, you still have short fuse too, so it explodes instantly. We still have cooldown recovery too. We have potent exposure here for more exposure. Overabundance 2 for +1 to limit, and Spell Echo, so it drops 2 at the same time. Then we still have Orb of Storms, same story, I barely use it. You can use it in stationary encounters and boss fights, but, you know, mainly you don't really need to use it, but we still have it on the bar, so still Overabundance 1, or should actually be Overabundance 2, no clue why it has 1. Lightning Mastery, Rapid Casting 2, and Considered Casting here. We have Flame Wall with Prolonged Duration, Fortress, Rapid Casting, and Fire Mastery just to empower our Spark in a boss fight. Elemental Weakness with Prolonged Duration, Heightened Curse, Cursed Ground, Magnified Area, and Lightning Mastery. So this is also mainly for boss fights. It's not extremely powerful, since remember, not a lot of our damage is actually lightning damage, most is physical. But you know, you can still use this to give you like a little bit of a boost. And then cast on critical, so this is basically to trigger arc. Not so much about the damage. It does decent damage and it does decent clear, but mostly it gives us a 50% more shock. So this actually gives us a big shock, and it's very useful on boss fights. But it also gives like some clear in the maps. We run it with Sion's Temper, so we can cast it in a Nova. Deliberation for just some more damage. Considered Casting for more damage, and Boundless Energy, so it triggers more often. And then, last but not least, we have Siphon Elements with Harmonic Remnants and Lightning Mastery. So this is really just for getting some extra Lightning Remnants for our arc. And then we have like one more, which is Lightning Warp. So we only use this for the gems because we need 10 green gems and 10 red gems. So if you count my green gems, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and actually it's 10 if I put the Ricochet back in. And then let's count the red ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we do this because we are running the Gem Enthusiast here on an Anoint. So we need 10 red support gems for 5% increased maximum life. And we need 10 green support gems for 5% extra movement speed. So we're not really using this spell at all. Same goes for the support gems we have here in the Galvanic Field of our wand. Not being used at all, but you know, we just need them to get the bonus from our Gem Enthusiast here. Alright, let's look at the items for the hybrid version. So let's start with the wand. So you want to have a wand, and ideally you want to have either spell damage with spells that cost life, or gain damage, and you know, crit chance is mandatory, crit damage bonus is the bonus, cast speed would be better, and +4 skills, +5 obviously if you can afford it, but you know, this is still kind of a budget build, so I'm just including a +4, and I'm socketing critical hit chance for spells into it. And so why we don't want to have increased spell damage or increased lightning damage, basically because even the gain damages are not that good. They are okay, but it's not the best you can get. And we want that because we are just using the Bloodletting here. And the Bloodletting basically just gives us physical damage. So if we look at the damage of our Spark, you can see it does 18k physical damage and just 4k lightning damage. So mainly it does physical damage. So if we have gained if we have like extra lightning damage, that's not going to count for the physical damage, but the extra spell damage or spell damage for spells that cost life will count for it. So that's why you want to have those, and you don't want to have lightning damage, especially later if you're transitioning to the, you know, full life version. You don't want to have any lightning damage or elemental damage anymore whatsoever. And that the same goes for our focus, basically. You can get one with spell damage. You want to have +3 all spell skills. You know, a little bit of energy shield is nice, but not mandatory here. Cast speed is also nice. Resistance is nice. So you pretty much can get whatever you want to have. Ultimately, our goal is to get Raspid here. But this build is basically if you cannot afford Raspid yet. Then we have our helmet. I used the helmet to pick up at least 20 spirit. It feels like the best way to pick up 20 spirit because we need 120 spirit for our build. So I recommend getting these because this is like the easiest and cheapest slot to pick it up. And then, you know, on top of it, I feel like Helm is a very great spot to get rarity of items, so I'm trying to get like 40+% rarity of items. These are usually pretty cheap. Everything on top, you know, resistances is a bonus, but not mandatory. For a chest piece, you really want to just have high energy shields, so like 800+ will be nice. Resistances here is a bonus, but really the only thing which matters here is the high energy shield. Then gloves, you can just get any gloves. It's nice if you already have your gloves with increased effect of soul cores, but they are a little bit expensive. That's why I did not include them in this guide yet. So in this guide, you can basically use any gloves. You don't need the chance to gain a Can't Search when you deal a critical hit. It's basically just also a wasted stat because we already have it in our skill tree. But basically any gloves with maximum life resistances, and, you know, ideally you could get like 2 sockets, ideally get, you know, soul core effect if you want to have it. Just check the trade links in the description down below. For our boots, we basically just want to have 30 or 35% movement speed with 2 sockets and some resistance fix, and I'm putting the reduced movement speed penalty in here. Obviously, if you already have like speed boots with the, you know, movement speed runes, it's nice, but since this build is still kind of budget, I'm just including this with the reduced movement speed penalty. Our belt pretty much just obtains some maximum life and fix your resistances. Having this stat increased life regeneration rate during effect of any life flask is okay, but it doesn't really do so much. Mainly just during the ramp up, so if you do the initial ramp up, like as you can see, it's a little slow. You can spam your life flask and it's gonna increase the speed of your ramp up. So that's basically what that stat gives you, but it's absolutely not mandatory. You can also just, you know, ramp up for like 1 or 2 extra seconds. Then we have Seed of Cataclysm. If we don't have Raspid focus yet, this is nice critical hit chance and spell damage bonus. Also, you know, some chaos resistance. And you can get this with a Corrupted Implicit. The skill speed is pretty nice, but you can get these resistances or stats. It's pretty easy. These are like 30x or something. And then last but not least, we have a ring here. Ring with just, you know, cast speed, some elemental resistances and maximum life. Rarity is always a bonus. Attributes are always a bonus. But for like a, you know, a little bit of a budget build, you're not going to need that. And then we have our life flask. So you want to have a life flask with as many increased charges as possible. So 68% is kind of the sweet spot to not pay like a lot of money for this. And we're going to use this because we have our passive here, which is going to be the Sanguine Tides. So this basically takes 40% of your life flask and gives you like a 50% damage buff for it, which is permanent. So that's why you want to have a life flask with as many charges as possible. A bonus is definitely increased amount recovered, but again, as we just talked about, it's just for a better ramp up. So it's really, in the map, you don't use the flask at all. It's more just, you know, to give you a little bit of quality of life for the ramp up here. Now we take a look at the passive tree for the hybrid variant. So if you don't have your Force Ascendancy yet, you're going to skip these Sanguine Tides. Because, I mean, this gives you a 50% more damage, but this is still the best thing to skip on this build. Besides that, you know, we don't really get the life leech. If you feel like you're having trouble staying alive, you can get this, but I feel like the regeneration outclasses the life leech by like many times, and I have not been using this at all. You can use it on like a regeneration map, but I didn't really need it at all. So then we just go basically for the spell damage here, pick up some cast speed, get the critical damage bonus here, pick up the critical hit chance here because we still don't have the Raspid focus, so we need critical hit chance still. Then we go like this kind of strange way to pick up this wheel with big energy shield and movement speed. I feel like it's kind of an efficient variant. We go up here, pick up all the life cost and life regeneration nodes. These are pretty nice. Here we pick up all the Arcane Search nodes. Arcane Search is basically our main attack speed and regeneration scaler in this build. And then we go all the way here, pick up the jewel slot, and pick up Zealot's Oath. This basically makes our life regeneration apply to energy shields. So this gives us like this big like 10k total life pool because our energy shield basically regenerates on top of our life. Then we go pick up these regeneration nodes here. You don't have to pick these up if you're like low on skill points, but I recommend it. Then we have like the crit nodes here, which are very strong. We go over here, pick up the blood magic. And then here we have a nice spot for our Undying Hate. So you need Undying Hate with Tribute of Tagrod. It's nice if you can get attribute passives with, you know, Intelligence, Dexterity, Strength, doesn't matter. It's nice if you can get that, but don't sweat it. It's not mandatory. In this case, it just gives me like, you know, what is it, like 28 intelligence, which is nice bonus, but you don't have to get it. The small passive one literally does nothing, so only the attribute one does something anyway. And we use it to pick up the Sacrifice of Blood. This basically gives us 1 life regeneration per 8 life spent over the past 8 seconds. This life regeneration scales with our life regeneration we pick up in the skill tree, so we basically regenerate more life than we use over time. So this gives us this nice super defensive life regeneration. And on top of it, it also gives us 50% more life cost of skills, which scales with our Bloodletting gem, giving us even more damage. Then we go down here, basically just pick up a jewel slot again. We pick up these life recovery nodes. This cluster is really strong. Life recovery rate is basically multiplicative life regeneration, so highly recommend picking this up. Then we get all the movement speed nodes here. Pick up this one. This is very important. It doesn't really say movement speed, but, you know, removing the penalty gives you like 6% or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. And then last but not least, we get this movement speed after killing. Obviously, you could skip these if you're bossing, but for maps, these are very nice. And then our Anoint is going to be the Gem Enthusiast here. So as we already talked in the skills, this basically gives us increased maximum life for 10 red support gems and 5% increased movement speed. Then let's talk about the jewels. So we use one from nothing here, which is the one with resonance. This is pretty cheap. It basically doesn't cost anything, but it gives us some value nodes. So if we look at the resonance here, we basically get like 2 decent crit nodes with attributes here. We get like a 8% cast speed node, and we get this, you know, spaghettification, which basically gives us all attributes and movement speed, which is pretty nice. And then besides that, for all the other jewels, we want to go for maximum energy shield, critical hit chance, and skill effect duration. And on top of that, you can, you know, get spell damage or magnitude of ailments or magnitude of shock. As soon as you switch to a Raspit, we want to have critical hit damage bonus. But since we are not running Raspit here yet, you want to have critical hit chance on all your jewels. So again, here's another one. Spell damage, energy shield, critical hit chance, skill effect duration. These are pretty cheap. And, you know, all jewels are going to be the same. Again, you can switch the spell damage for magnitude of shock or magnitude of ailments. But besides that, we're going to use the same jewels in all the slots. The energy shield is nice and defensive. And these really just only cost like 10 to 50 exalts each. If you want to have lower rolls, you can even get them, you know, for a little bit less. Alright, so here's the showcase for the tier 3 Xesht with the hybrid version. So none of our items really cost more than, you know, 100 exalts. Some are like 50, some are 10, some are maybe like a little bit more. But overall, this gear is not very expensive. We basically have just like a, you know, random wand with some crit and +4. Just some helmet to pick up 20 plus spirit, some resistances here. Chest armor just to pick some resistances and a high amount of energy shield, a random focus with +3 skills. This should have cast speed, by the way. This should also have cast speed. So I'm not very optimized in this build, but I didn't want to, you know, spend too much time putting this together. This is still one of my old amulets. It has great defenses and basically 3 spell skills and cast speed. Like the rarity is nice, but obviously that just makes it ridiculously expensive, so you don't need that. Then a ring, just cast speed, double cast speed basically. You know, some life, some attributes, some resistances. We have the Seed of Cataclysm here. It's nice if you can pick it up with a implicit like skill speed, but it's not mandatory. Then we just have some random gloves with Arcane Search on crit, which is important, and, you know, the increased effect of Arcane Search on new rune. Random belt with life and resistance fix, and boots with just, you know, reduced movement speed penalty, and again, some resistance fix. So let's go for the tier 3 Xesht. Right, here's the map showcase for the budget variant. None of these items really cost more than 50 exalts. Some were like, in between 50 and 100. Some were also just like 10 exalts. So we just have a random +4 wand. We just have, some energy shield helmet with spirit. The, high energy shield armor for hybrid scaling. Random focus with cast speed. Not even cast speed. With just, +3 and some crit. This ring is good because of the magic find, but it's a decent resistance cast speed ring. This amulet is good because it's very defensive, but it's only expensive because of the rarity, really. Then we have the Seed of Cataclysm here. You can try to get one with a decent Corrupted Implicit. They are usually cheap. This was like 30x. Random Gloves was really just 14% increased, 14% chance to gain a can't search. Belt to just fix resistance and some life, and Boots basically just 2 sockets, some resistances, and reduce movement speed penalty by moving. So that's pretty much everything we have here. So we have like a decently, rolled map here, and, we just use like a random Delirious Waystone. So let's see how that goes. Alright, here's the skills for the budget Spark. So first of all, we have Life Remnants with Harmonic Remnants, just for some extra regeneration. Then we have Sigil of Power on our weapon swap with Magnified Area 2, Prolonged Duration 2, and Cooldown Recovery 2. This is actually important. We need the chiming stuff on our secondary slot, and I recommend to slam a +5 to all spell skills. So for example, you can buy this with increased cast speed, and for example, cold damage, it's not going to cost anything. And then you're going to slam the Perfect Essence of Sorcery on for +5 to all spell skills. Why do we want to have +5 to all spell skills on our weapon swap? Well, basically all our skills are going to be cast with the chiming stuff except for Spark. So only Spark is projectiles. So projectiles is going to be used with our Widowhail and our quiver, because, you know, this is going to just buff projectile skills. It's projectile skills on the quiver, projectile speed, projectile damage. So this is just really going to work for Spark. The other skills gain no benefit from this setup at all. And that's why we have all skills on weapon set 2 except for Spark. So you can see Spark is on weapon set 1, Frostbomb weapon set 2, Orb of Storms weapon set 2, Elemental Weakness weapon set 2, Mana Tempest weapon set 2, Flame Wall weapon set 2, and Cast on Elemental Ailment is on both, and Siphon Elements as well. So that's about the weapon sets real quick. So let's talk about Spark. So Spark is our main damage skill. Don't sweat the tooltip damage of Spark, okay? A lot of our damage does not show up in the tooltip because we have a lot of conditional nodes in the skill tree, which are essentially always true, but they are not in this tooltip. So if you have 3 to 5k DPS on the Spark tooltip, that's completely fine. And for Spark, we really just use Efficiency 2, Projectile Acceleration 3. This is very important. Don't forget this skill, because this gives projectile speed and damage. So it basically says increases and reductions to projectile speed also apply to projectile damage. And our quiver has 37% projectile speed multiplied by, you know, 300%. So this really gives the main damage. If we take this off, you can see this like cuts the damage in half always, almost. And also the projectiles are not going to hit anything without the speed. So this is very important. Then we use Ricochet 3. This basically gives you always pierce. So if you get a penetrating quiver with 100% pierce, you don't need the Ricochet. But if you want to are on a budget and you don't want to spend the extra premium for penetrating quiver, you can just get any quiver and just run the Ricochet 3. And for mapping, I honestly recommend mobility. You don't need more damage. You have enough damage for mapping. So mobility really helps to move on faster here. Alright, then Frostbomb is one of our most important skills. First of all, it applies exposure, but it creates 2 of the cold infusions. So as you can see, if we drop one, it explodes twice and we get 2 cold infusions. And the cold infusions make the Spark, which does a lot of damage and fires a lot of extra projectiles. So very, very important is Frostbomb. You always use your Frostbomb. You walk, put the Frostbomb in front of you, pick it up. That's your playstyle. You just walk, Frostbomb in front of you, pick it up, and then you shoot the sparks with the frost. So that's the gameplay loop pretty much for this. Frostbomb, picking up, spark. That's how this entire thing works, right? So very important. Don't forget to use your Frostbomb. Obviously, you use it on boss and elites for exposure as well. But this is mainly to get the frost and the cold infused spark, which is really strong. So that's why we play it with short fuse too. So it goes off 80% faster. So this is very important. If you skip this gem, you gotta have a horrible time. Overabundance 2, so we can have 2, then Spell Echo, so it actually drops 2, and Cooldown Recovery 2, so we can cast it faster. Then Orb of Storms, pretty much, you just drop it down, and it does a lot of damage, and it leaves Lightning Infusions after it expires, so it's actually pretty nice. Then we play it with Controlled Destruction, we play it with Lightning Mastery here, we play it with Overabundance 2, so we can launch 2, and considered casting for it to do more damage. Elemental Weakness, not much to say, it's our curse, so we put it on mobs to do more elemental damage with Curse Ground, so we can precast it on bosses. Heightened Curse, so it has no magnitude. Magnified Area, so it's larger. And Prolonged Duration, so it lasts longer. Mana Tempest, this is the skill we use while moving. Mana Tempest greatly buffs our damage. It gives 80% more damage, and the spells also like Split, which is like kind of chaining, right? But it costs a lot of mana. So if we are running, right, in a map, so we always drop Mana Tempest, shoot like twice, and you go on. Then the Mana Tempest is going to expire, we create a new one, shoot twice, because the Mana Tempest is going to last 2 seconds longer than we are actually in it. And we always want to do this, because when we use the Mana Tempest, the sparks are just significantly stronger. Then we have Flame Wall, really just use it for bosses to get some extra power on the Spark with Fortress, Spell Cascade, and Prolonged Duration. So then we have our Cast on Elemental Ailment. So one thing about Cast on Elemental Ailment, if you read through it, it says it gains 1 power per ignite, 1 power per shock, but 10 power per freeze. That's why this build triggers this so crazy often. Because we use Call of the Brotherhood to convert all our lightning damage to cold damage, and then, you know, we basically freeze all mobs. And this triggers quite a lot. And what we do is, this triggers Arc, and we have it with Projectile Acceleration 3, so we get still the bonus from our quiver here, like all the projectile speed stuff, because Arc is a projectile spell. Then we use Considered Casting for more damage, and we use Boundless Energy, so it goes off more often. And last but not least, we have Siphon Element. This is really just for, when we freeze the mobs, we have a 7% chance to drop a cold remnant. We're not really going to shock the mobs because we don't do lightning damage, because it's all converted to cold. But we're going to freeze them, and it's going to drop extra remnants. So it's just basically quality of life. You don't have to run this. You can also run a Convalescence if you want, so you have a little bit more of a defensive layer in your energy shield. But I would recommend to run Siphon Elements, because you usually will not have a lot of trouble staying alive with this build. Let's look at the items for the budget. So make sure to follow the trade links in the description down below so you can buy all these items. So first of all, we want to have a Widowhail, which has at least 236%. 236% because we get 64% from our skill tree, so we can reach 300%, so we basically get plus 6 skills. Because the skills in our quiver can only be incremented by increments of 50%. So you always need a whole skill. So that's why we want to reach 300% ideally here, 350 for later, but for this budget build, 300 is absolutely fine. And that's why you can get like a 236 plus Widowhail, which doesn't cost anything, even with 3 sockets. It's pretty cheap. You can just get it for like 1 or 2 exalts. And that together with the 64% from our skill tree will just work like this. And you, again, ideally get like one with 3 sockets, because you can socket triple skill speed in. These are like, I think, 20 exalts each. No, these are 9 exalts each. So they're not very expensive. I highly recommend getting skill speed here. Then for our equipment, it's really nothing special. You basically just want to get a lot of energy shield and maximum mana. And resistances. That's pretty much it. So same for our chest piece. You want to have 30 spirit on the chest, but besides that, really just energy shield and resistances. For gloves, really, same story. We just want to have some energy shield, some resistances, maximum mana or maximum life. Same for the boots, maximum mana, some energy shield, some resistances, and 30% plus move speed. And the belt is really just, pick up some mana and fix some resistances. So it's really as simple as that. For your ring, you want to get cast speed. This is not the best one, but, ideally get some cast speed, some mana regeneration, some mana, some all rest. These are pretty cheap. Then you have one Call of the Brotherhood. If you use the trade links, you already get like an almost perfect one. They are also like 1 or 2 exalts each, so pretty cheap. We need this to convert our lightning damage to cold, so we can freeze, so we can take advantage of all our spells. And then last but not least, we have an amulet. Really, you should get energy shield on your amulet. You can get pretty high values of energy shield here. Maximum energy shield is nice. If you have percent energy shield as well, it's even better, but don't spend too much. And, I would not get more than a +2 spell skills or projectile skills with, a little bit of cast speed. And that's pretty much all you need from the gear. And then, we already talked about the weapon swap. The weapon swap, we really want to have a stuff, the chiming stuff, with as much cast speed as possible, and basically cold damage is nice but not requirement, and +5 to level of all spell skills. And if you don't know how to get this, you can basically buy this stuff with just the cast speed and some other stats for cheap. And then what you're gonna do is you're just gonna use the perfect essence of sorcery. So this one is basically just gonna slam +5 to level of all spell skills on your stuff, so you don't have to pay a premium for this. Just buy any stuff with 50% plus cast speed, and maybe some cold damage is nice but not a requirement, and just slam this essence on, and you're gonna be good to go. Alright, let's look at the passive tree here. This should be for roughly like a level 85 character, but you can adjust as you go. So first of all, let's talk about the ascendancies. So when you're starting up with a Blood Mage, the ascendancies are actually negative, because the life cost is just annoying, but you cannot really benefit from it in the very beginning. It's just basically a downside. You get the Spell Leech for life, which is not going to be insanely strong at the beginning, but you still get it. And then you get Gasping Wounds, which, prevents some life to be lost, and, distributes over like 4 seconds. So it's a little bit of a survivability layer here. And then, once you get your third ascendancy, you want to get like your maximum life to the energy shield of your equipped body. So this gives you a good amount of hit pool with the life. But if you don't have this point yet, don't sweat it. You're still going to be just fine. We don't use these crit nodes yet, because in the beginning, crit is not good. Crit will only start up getting better once you have more gear, once you have more crit, once you have more levels, once you have a stronger build. But in the beginning, you're not going to reach very high crit chances, even on a Blood Mage. So I would not recommend playing crit in the beginning. So this build does not focus on crit at all. Later on, we transition into a stronger build which uses crit, but this build doesn't use crit yet. So let's look at the tree. So we pretty much just get elemental damage. So as you can see, we just go elemental damage here. We take the cast speeds, energy shield nodes here. Energy shield nodes here, we get the mana cost reduction nodes here. They're very important because mana cost is crazy. Same we do here. So we get the 2 mana cost reduction nodes. They're really helpful. And then we go over here and we just, pick up these big energy shield and int nodes and these skill effect duration nodes, this jewel slot, this cast speed. And if you have the from nothing, it's really nice because you can get like all these value nodes. So this from nothing here with, Chaos Inoculation, very difficult word. So this from nothing basically allows you to get the skills inside here. So we get this mana cost efficiency and more damage for triggered spells. So we actually have triggered spells as our arc is. This is pretty nice. It gives you ailment and stun threshold based on your energy shield. This is just a plain 11% extra chaos damage for one node. And these freeze nodes, this ignores elemental resistances of frozen enemies. This is very powerful. This is basically just skill effect duration, and this basically gives you freeze build up and 50% increased damage against frozen enemies. So these are very strong value nodes. And then in our weapon set 1, let's just talk a little bit about weapon sets here. Because our weapon set 1 is basically just projectiles, it's just Spark, and our weapon set 2 is everything else. So for our weapon set 2, we pretty much just play, curses and duration here. So really curse magnitudes, these are all curse magnitudes. This is skill effect duration, this is even more curse magnitudes. And in our weapon set 1, we put all the freeze stuff. So we have this freeze node here, gains 25% of cold damage as extra fire against frozen enemies. Very powerful node. Freeze build up, very powerful nodes. And then we have these cast speed and mana regeneration nodes here in the first skill slot. We have some damage if you chilled recently here in our first weapon slot. And then it gets very important because you have all the projectile nodes, and we want to have these projectile nodes in our weapon set 1 because they're not going to do anything for a weapon set 2, right? So we have projectile nodes here. Projectile speed is equal to damage, and then we have these quiver nodes here. So these increase the effect of our quiver. So we have a total of 64% with these nodes. So if you noticed, our bow has 242%, right? So we just want to reach over 300. So with these combined with the bow, we just want to reach over 300. So we get the 6 skill points from the quiver. So the extra 6. And besides that, we basically just pick up these value elemental damage nodes here. They just give, a good amount of elemental damage and freeze build up. And besides that, we're basically just picking jewel slots and some cold penetration here. So let's talk a little bit about the jewels. So for the jewels, I like to get jewels with maximum energy shield, mana regeneration, and magnitude of shock. These are pretty cheap. And actually, magnitude of shock doesn't do anything in the build, but it doesn't really matter for now since we don't shock. But basically, you want to have mana regeneration and a skill effect duration. So then let's take a quick look at the jewels and annoyance. So we have the from nothing as already discussed because we need this to pick up all these value nodes. But besides that, we just use pretty simple jewels. So we want to just have maximum energy shield, mana regeneration, and skill effect duration. Ideally, you can get spell damage, but these are 5 to 10 exalts each, so they're pretty cheap. And it really helps getting a little bit of extra energy shield, mana rec, and skill effect duration is just nice for Spark. And that's pretty much all the jewels I'm getting. This is all the same, maximum energy shield, regeneration rate, skill effect duration. Same here with a little bit of spell damage, and here's another one, say maximum energy shield, mana regeneration, and skill effect duration. That's all the jewels I'm getting. And for the Anoint, if you're on the budget, I highly recommend heavy ammunition. This is really cheap. It's really just Guild Greed Greed, so that's 5 exalts or something like that. And it gives you 40% projectile damage, and projectile stun is also a pretty decent stat. But the 40% increased projectile damage for a cheap Anoint like this is pretty much the best thing you can get. Right, let's do a little bit of the showcase here. So this is our character we just bought. We have a 240% Widowhail. We just have a random, energy shield helmet, random energy shield chest with 30 spirit. +2 spell amulet with some energy shield, you know, a random cast speed ring, the Call of the Brotherhood, random quiver with +2 and 37 projectile, mana on kill, and damage. So it's not a penetrating quiver. These are very, very cheap. Then we have just some random gloves, which really don't have anything but life and some resistances, and some boots, which really just have movement speed and some resistances and mana. And our belt also just some random resistances and some mana. So we really don't have anything. Let's just do like a random map with like a map boss and a breach. And we, you know, we're assuming we're just starting into endgame, so let's just do a white map for now. We don't need to over complicate it. And let's see on the map. I'm going to explain a little bit what we do. Right, so we just go and spam Spark, and we, you know, cast our Frost Bombs to pick up the infusions. Then we just put Mana Tempest, and everything should die just fine. Rinse and repeat, Frost Bombs, and Mana Tempest. Just push forward. Frost Bomb, Mana Tempest, and push. And this way we really just, you know, spam our Spark and push forward when, you know, Frost Bomb and Mana Tempest come off cooldown. We just drop them down. And as you can see, like the elemental invocation is already creating like lots of cold infusions we can just pick up while walking, because we freeze so much with the Call of the Brotherhood. It's not even almost, I would say it's not even completely necessary. Where's this boss? To even cast the Frost Bombs. But you know, it's kind of, if you're in the loop of doing this, then you know it becomes a little bit easier. Why is this girl like crazy, like healing like this crazy? I don't even know what's wrong with this. But you know, she has like my character level, right? And I'm like level 96. So it's probably like a little bit buffed up. But yeah, anyway, so let's do the breach. Like, same story. I should have actually regenerated my energy shield before. Let's hope it starts recharging. So now we're just gonna fall back a little bit and wait for the energy shield to recharge, really. Because we don't wanna be without energy shield. It's our primary defensive layer. But yeah, now we have energy shield again. So again, we just go forward, throw the Mana Tempest, throw the Frost Bombs, and you can see like all these infusions, we just pick them up. So we have permanently like the cold infused Spark, which is just really strong. And yeah, so we just push forward, make sure to get in the Mana Tempest. The mana on kill on our quiver basically fixes all the mana for us in most situations. So really, the quiver gives us like 60 mana per kill or something. I don't want to drag this breach out so far. Again, you can always curse like the stronger elites if they come up. But in general, always the same playstyle. We just push forward with the Mana Tempest. And as you can see, like everything just dies. Now we have the Abyss here, same story, we just push forward with the Mana Tempest. We can drop a Sigil like once in a while if we expect like harder rares. But usually it's not even required. You can see like these are just, you know, being completely obliterated. It's like these mobs are like a little bit strong sometimes. So I'm just, you know, sometimes you just want to curse like these big Abyss guys. But yeah, so this is like the harder part anyway. So usually, you know, if we just start an endgame, sure you can do the Abyss, but it's not gonna be that rough, because I think it like kind of scales with your character level as well. But yeah, so let's push forward. As you can see, like everything gets frozen. We pick up the remnants here and just move forward. Sigil of Power, Mana Tempest. We just move. And as you can see, like, you know, we get also like decent okay, this is a little bit dicey here. Not sure what this mob is. That was like actually pretty strong. I don't know where it came from. But yeah, that's pretty much the gameplay loop. So if you have a lot of mobs, you don't even need to cast your Frost Bombs, because you're gonna pick up way more than enough infusions just from the elemental invocation, whatever it's called. Not elemental invocation, it's called Siphon Elements. But yeah, so we have the boss left. So bosses, obviously, you want to pre-buff a little bit, ideally on a boss if you're not strong enough. So I just put like 2 orbs of storm down and wait for like the remnants. So then I just pick them up. So now I have a pre-buffed lightning wall. So then we just basically do like all our stuff and put the Mana Tempest down and start chewing on the boss. So it should go fairly fast. Once it's frozen, it goes really fast. So as you can see, like as soon as it's frozen, we do like crazy damage. And that's your map boss. Like it didn't really, you know, stand a chance at all. You want to be a little bit careful not standing in the Mana Tempest for too long, because it's also going to drain your life since we are Blood Mage. But yeah, that's the showcase of this build, so it's pretty easy to, like, you know, go through tier 15 maps with even just, you know, 100 Exalt or less budget. So I just want to show this off, so if you're struggling, because I know I have a lot of people on my stream who are saying, yeah, I cannot beat, like, tier 6 maps, I'm completely stuck. So, you know, this is a build with very, very simple gear and very low investment, which will get you to endgame and will get you to, like, your better build, which is gonna, you know, really blast. But this is a very, very great beginner build.